I don't see us on actual Facebook.
All right, guys. Hi, welcome to Leadership Live. We're going to be hosting our 12th episode. Wow, these are going by pretty fast. Hopefully, you guys have had an amazing week. My name is Natalia, and I am a small business strategist and leadership development coach. I help small businesses overcome setbacks to success.
Hey guys, I am Jared Greer, leadership architect and performance coach, and I work with small businesses and executives and individuals to really just help you find more freedom, more control, more confidence in your life through a variety of ways. But love what I do, love this show, and we have an awesome guest for you today. So you're all going to be very thankful that you tuned in today.
Absolutely. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, what it really means to have emotional intelligence, and then also building emotional resilience within yourself and training your team to be more emotionally resilient, which ultimately helps to build the culture and to nurture the relationships and the connections that you have with your team. So very excited to bring on our guest, Jamie Serene. She has 15 years of leadership experience under her belt, and she's just an incredible force of nature when it comes to leading Gen Zs and millennials through change. So very excited to bring her on. Unfortunately, she's not in the lobby. So let me see if I can get her on here real quick.
We will have her soon, I'm very sure. Because this week we have the tech support, which is Natalia. Every other week, I've been the weak link trying to bring people on and failing to do so. So it looks like we've got a good group. We've got Nick. We've got Mary. Welcome.
So guys, go ahead. Sorry, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as we bring our guest on today, if you guys have questions related to leadership, related to how you can increase your own leadership, things that you're struggling with, questions that you have, put those in the comments, because we are going to meet with our guest and she'll be able to answer probably a lot of them. And then anything that is left over, then we'll try to answer after we let her go after about the first 30 minutes. So we definitely want you to be involved. And if you've got questions, throw them in there now.
Absolutely. I'm just going to send her the link really quickly again to join us here. I think that might be part of the problem. So let's see if this helps. I think we've all been have found ourselves in this experience where we are emotionally triggered, both either as the leader in the leadership role, or we find our team, those like individuals within our team, struggling with their own emotions or how to process them or identify what they really are. And so I would love to hear kind of what your guys' experiences have been within your own work, whether it's as a team member or as a leader, in navigating the emotional complexities of working with the team, and how you've either processed your own emotions or dealt with them, or also the struggles that you've had in doing this.
Yeah, and I think when you think about when you're a manager, when you're a leader, you have so many just things that you have to pay attention to, and certainly the emotions of your team, how people are feeling, it just is such a central part to all of that. So on top of the data and all the reporting that you have to do, on top of some of the admin stuff, on top of the training and development that's required, you also almost have to make sure that everybody's happy, that everybody's bought in. And sometimes that's where leaders are like, can't they just do their job? Can't they just do what I say, kind of a thing?
Right.
But certainly it's critical. You have to have a strategy for it. You have to improve your ability to do it well, and it can be certainly tough.
Absolutely. Well, Jamie is here, and so we're very excited to bring her on and hear what she has to say. There she is.
Hey guys, how are you? Can you see me?
Yes.
We can. Hi, Jamie. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, Jamie, would you love to give maybe just a brief introduction to our audience?
Sure. So my name is Jamie Serene, and I am a women's leadership advocate, and spent 15 years in corporate America and human resources, and really created my own platform for developing the next generation of women, specifically Gen Z and millennials, and just helping women focus on their mindset, their voice activation, and leadership theory. So I studied leadership theory both for my master's and my bachelor's. So just kind of weaving in all those different topics to create something new for our people.
It's incredible. I've actually, oh, sorry, Jared.
No, I was just going to say, thank you for lending us your expertise for a few minutes. We're excited to learn from you. Obviously, you've got a lot of experience and a lot of education. So everybody who's watching, tag all your friends and bring them here. They're gonna learn a lot today.
Yes, and bring your questions, and we're going to do our best to try and answer them as best as possible. But I personally have had the pleasure of going to some workshops with Jamie and seeing her present. And she's an incredible presenter. She's got some really wonderful ideas to share with you guys today. So we're just going to jump in and really ask Jamie, I would love to hear, you have this amazing background in corporate leadership. So I would really love to know sort of what your experience in corporate leadership was like, and also what you found the biggest need that wasn't being met in leadership during your time in corporate leadership.
Yeah. So leadership is really just a word, right? And so the way that I look at it is it's the ability to influence positive change. And so people hear the word leadership and they have different ideas of what that means. My time in corporate America was spent really developing people to perform at their highest level. And unfortunately, on the other side of that, you have people that are not performing, or there's some sort of behavior issue that kind of impacts the workforce. And so I think the biggest issue that I saw in the corporate side was the emotional intelligence. And so when you have behavior issues or relationship issues, it slows down the work. And a lot of the times in HR and in your leadership role, you're focusing on the problem, and you're focusing on, well, we want to resolve the problem, but we're going to address it through discipline. And that's the way that typically it's addressed, because you want to mitigate risk, right, as an organization. And so I think the missing link there is that it's reactive versus proactive. And so looking at, well, why are there relationship issues, and really looking at triggers. I say emotional triggers, emotional resilience, and teaching people how to identify that before it gets to a level of, okay, we have to go to discipline now. That's the easy road, right? And I think the more difficult road is, as a leader, teaching people how to look at themselves. That's kind of a taboo topic, because we think, well, they should know how to do that on their own, just like they should be healthy physically on their own, just like they should be emotionally fit. And so I think that's a responsibility as a leader, to not look at that as a taboo topic and teach their employees how to look at being emotionally resilient.
Absolutely.
Jamie, I can I just ask you a question about that real quick? Because do you feel like the leaders themselves are able to do that? I mean, in your experience, obviously you've been, you have an extensive background. I mean, how often are you coming across that leader who, one, understands it for themselves and isn't teaching it, or, does understand it for themselves and is teaching it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. So you have to model it. And so some leaders are good at that, right? But some aren't. And it just depends. A lot of our leaders are put in those roles because they're operationally and technically smart and savvy. And to build that emotional resilience is really looking at yourself. And so, I mean, I've come across leaders that they're looking externally at the issue, but when you look at them and hear them, they're also in an emotional state themselves. So have they really stopped and paused and thought through the issue? So I think it's modeling the way and showing your staff that you are self-reflective. And we all have moments where we're not emotionally intelligent. That's not being emotionally resilient, is that you won't have those moments, is that you learn from them, you address them, and you own up to it, right? And I think if your staff see that you come back and say, I reacted this way, or I'm having a moment, and this is what's going on for me, and this is what I commit to moving forward, they see you are emotionally resilient, and you model the way for them to do that as well, instead of placing the blame externally.
Can you define for us emotional resilience, just so that our viewers kind of have a general context as well? Like, how would you define that for someone?
Well, it would be my definition. So being emotionally resilient is that you are aware of your emotions, and you are aware why they're happening, right? So we all have them. We all have moments of happiness and joy, and then we have moments of being triggered and being angry, upset, or sad. But I think it's being aware of them and why. And so I look at the V-SCARF model, and we can talk about that in a little bit, but it's not just saying this happened, but I know why it's triggered me. Either it's taken me back to a place of an experience I've had before that didn't sit well with me, and so I'm making meaning of that experience, and then making meanings of the patterns. So looking at the patterns and saying, I know typically this triggers me, so therefore I'm looking at that, and before I respond, I'm pausing and I'm saying, is this really me? Or is it them? Or how do I respond versus just responding in the moment? And then you have a relationship gone bad potentially.
Right. I love that. So I definitely want to get into your values chart, because I think that this is really going to help people understand and break down, again, like you said, their own values and recognize what might be triggering them in the workplace that sets them off emotionally. But before we go there, you actually moved out of the corporate space. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what really propelled you into leaving corporate America and stepping into building your own leadership business.
Good question. I think in the corporate sector, some companies are doing a really good job about their leadership programs and about employee engagement and culture, and some are not. And so I think for me, it was seeing how can I have the most impact in my career without being pigeonholed to this is our culture or this is our policy. And for me, being in HR, it's really having real conversations with people. What's going on with you? What's happening with you? Because there's a root to the issue, and being in the corporate side, I'm not always able to delve into those roles. But I think also it's filling a gap, the mindset gap. So, understanding your triggers, understanding your childhood and how that impacts how you show up at work. Those are things I couldn't really talk about in the corporate world, and people would look at me like I'm crazy.
Right. Well, it's so funny because we actually had a social psychologist on a few episodes back, and she was saying that when you're in the leadership role, you're really representing to your team and those that you're leading. You're representing all of the roles that they had in terms of leadership, right? So whether it's their parents or their aunts or their uncles or other leadership positions that they've had in the past, like you're stepping into this really big position where you're kind of representing a lot for the person that you're leading. And again, there's a lot of responsibility that goes into that. And again, how do you communicate and lead from the space where you can help them understand themselves in that process? And then also yourself as a leader, how do you identify where you fall in your own emotions? I mean, again, I think Greg had just mentioned earlier that a lot of managers don't have this type of personal development component to, and I would say, they're not, personal development in this sense isn't really being brought up, like you said, in a way that can impact both the leadership and how they're leading their team.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, there's been so many times I've been in a meeting where it's like, okay, hand them the EAP packet, the Employee Assistance Program. Maybe they need counseling, but we can't really talk about that, nor is it our issue. But I think in leadership coaching, maybe you don't need a therapist, but let's be real. Let's talk about the models that you had and how you learned from them. And so, we bring into the workplace whatever we're experiencing at home. And if we haven't dealt through that, and some of those things are great examples, some of those aren't. And I think the personal component is definitely missing.
Yeah, absolutely. So go ahead, Jared.
I love that. I mean, I think it takes me back to many times where you talk to an employee and they would say, oh, I've just got this stuff going on at home, but I'm good. I left it at the door, right? And that's what managers say, like, leave your baggage at the door, come in and do your work, and then go out and leave.
It's not going to happen.
I totally agree with you. I think at the end of the day, we are not great at compartmentalizing. We're not as good as we like to pretend that we are. And whatever those challenges are, and we talk a lot about it here too, whatever those challenges are, whatever those habits are that are, holding us back in our personal lives, we bring those into the workplace and those impact us there. And so, I love the work you're doing because helping people to understand those and then probably rewrite them a little bit so that you can move
Right.
forward and be both successful in the office as well as in your personal life. I think that's what, growth is all about. That's what development is all about. So I love that.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Jamie. Well, I would love for you to sort of take the floor and really explain to us, break down what this values chart is and how it applies to this topic.
Sure. So in my teachings and in my coaching, I guess I would say I've adjusted the SCARF model that Dr. David Rock developed in 2008. And so he's a social psychologist who have done hundreds of studies on in people in the workplace when they feel a threat or when they feel a reward. And so his model is the SCARF model, which I'll go over in a second. And I've added V for values because that's something that we definitely want to look at. If our value is challenged, we show up in a way that may not be as emotionally intelligent unless we're looking at ourselves. So V stands for values. S is for status, C is for certainty, A is for autonomy, R is for relatedness, and F is for fairness. And so this is a model that you can use with your staff in two different ways. One, you can say, we are trying to become more emotionally intelligent in our department. And so here's the model, and it's up to you individually to look at when things aren't positive for you and you feel a push or pull. What area is activated? Is it your values? Do you know what your values are? Have you drilled down out of 100 types of values? What are your top 5? Or is it certainty? What part of the situation is triggering you so that you can look at that? And that's the why it's triggering you. Then the other piece of it, you can flip it around and do it as a positive, right? And so what are your values that light you up? So when you are in a good mood and you're productive, these are the areas that really contribute to a productive work environment. And so it's just a tool that I say would be proactive versus my team's a mess. I have this one person who's not performing and they're kind of being the bad apple. Now I have to do some intervention. Yeah.
Awesome. So what would you say, I think you had mentioned earlier, just sort of having like a personal experience with applying this with your team. Could you demonstrate how, a situation where a leader could actually use this themselves as they're working with their team?
So you could, let's say there is a dynamic in your team. Let's say you have a team of 10 and some of the work isn't getting done. Productivity is low, or there's some tension in the team. And again, the solution is not always to move to discipline and say you didn't meet this deadline or the quality isn't that good. It's to say, well, what's happening here? And so you could use it as a team building exercise or educational exercise to say, how can we look at ourselves to see, I hear, you're in my office complaining about this person, but bring it back to you. What could you have done differently? And where in these areas does it bother you? And so let's say there's a team that is being restructured and we don't know who is going to have what role. You're going to have a lot of autonomy issues. You're also going to have to... you're going to have autonomy issues, but you're also going to have certainty issues, right? So let's use this model and say, this is why we're kind of all uneasy right now. Let's face that. What can we do to turn it around? We don't know what's going to happen with this department within the next 3 months, but what can we do so we can work together and not have competition or silos or breakdowns? And so it's using it as a proactive model to look at that. And I just think individually, if it's one-on-one, you can use it as a coaching tool. And so I know you're having a problem with this one person. I really want to make sure you guys are getting along together, but I need you to do your work. And so here's a model for you to kind of go through. Maybe you don't want to share with me why this particular value is triggering you, if it's communication or respect. And if you can open up, then that's where you build the relationship. But it's teaching your employee this is the end product of your behavior or communication. I need you to do the internal work. And this is how you do the internal work.
I love that.
It's a shame. It reminds me of a couple episodes back. I shared an example of like one of my very first teams managing, and I had a woman on my team who was older. I was way too young to be managing anyone probably. And I remember I made an announcement that I didn't really care how long people took for lunch, as long as they came back. And I remember she about fell off her chair, rolling her eyes because, and from what you're saying, it sounds like she was probably more of maybe a certainty is her thing. Autonomy might have been her trigger. And I was like, let's be autonomous as long as we trust each other.
Right.
And so that kind of maybe created some of that friction. Is that applicable to the model that you're sharing?
Yeah, I mean, because it's there are two complete differences, and you're acting from your values, and you think that this is great, right? But maybe it's not a value for someone else. Yeah,
she did not like it at all.
Like, no, I need to be an hour because I need to know everyone else is only taking an hour. Yeah, and so I think that's an example that you can use, and it's whether or not the people want to do the work. This model is not. It's not easy. Okay, quick fix, black and white. It's like you really have to dig and figure out why things aren't working, and that's where the work is.
Well, and I think, I mean, we talk all the time about having leaders with a close proximity to their people. And so when you talk about doing the work, like if you're not with your people, then there's probably not a great chance that you're going to do the work or even be around when they roll their eyes, right? So, you know, moving them in that direction where they're with their people, they're willing to do the work. This gives them a good framework to say, okay, well, what it really is triggering you, to use your words, what really is triggering you, and then how do we make adjustments moving forward? And just by way of closing the loop, this particular employee that I had, I started meeting with her privately before I would have team meetings where I would make big announcements, because she also didn't like to get caught off guard. And so that way I could have a conversation with her. I could explain what I was doing. I could really go in deep with the rationale so that she had that certainty of like, okay, it makes sense versus who's this, you know, punk kid coming in here just throwing all the rules to the wind kind of a thing. So So I think proximity sounds like just an important part of it too.
And you added something key, which is communication, right? So actually talking about
it's a small thing, right? Just really
it's a small thing.
We don't really need it.
But you know, to flip side of it, if you really want to understand what motivates your staff and they don't know, you ask them, well, what motivates you? How can I recognize you so you feel good about it? And you get that, well, I don't really know. I'm kind of shy. I don't really want it in a group, and they can't answer you. Give them the model and say, just over the next 1 to 2 weeks, write down every time something excites you, you feel good about it. And then we can look at the patterns and say, this is how you should be recognized, or these are the types of things that you should be working on that light you up. So you could use it either way.
Sorry, I'm going to, go ahead, Natalia.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to ask one more question. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to hog all the time, but I'm very curious. So what do you find is difficult for leaders that you work with to latch on to, as it relates to this model? So you're coming in, you're saying, here's these 4 or 5 areas that you can really look at to reduce some of the friction and tension on your team, to get everybody in, rowing in the same direction. What is it that makes it hard for leaders to apply?
I would say they are in the current moment of now. Now I need it done. Now I need productivity high. Now I need the team to function together. But the issue is this model is proactive. It's not to sit there and address it in the moment. And so what I've seen time in and time out is because a leader, let's be honest, our operational leaders are in meetings all day. They're putting out fires. They're actually doing the work. Right. And they're spending a little bit of time with their staff. And so they're really only addressing it when it's already kind of turned around, right? Yeah. And so that's where I see the issue is that they knew about it a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. They didn't deal with it. Now it's this big deal and they want it fixed like that. And so sometimes that's why they're like, we have to discipline. We have to get this person out of here. And those are things that I've seen have been the biggest kind of setback.
Yeah, makes sense.
then how would you recommend a leader to become more proactive with this approach, to integrate this into their leadership model? I mean, at what point, I mean, do they set up a meeting for this? Do they integrate maybe some practice or some activity around this during their existing meetings? How can you kind of make this more integral to the work that they're doing without, it being a way to put out a fire once the fire is already burnt out?
It's really simple. Planning. That's it.
Great.
So if you look at it, like, do you have a strategic meeting at the beginning of the year and you say over the next 6 months to year, what are the things that I'm working on? If employee engagement and productivity with your staff is something, you need to plan it. What are the things you're planning once a month, once a week? Have a team working on it for you. Do not wait until things fall apart to plan it, right? It needs to be... So
that seems like a crazy strategy, Jamie. How do you explain that to people?
Well, I don't have time.
Yeah.
And so it's saying, well, do you need a consultant to help you? Do you need someone on your team that you're going to delegate as the engagement leader? What are the options here instead of saying, I don't have time?
Right. And I think it's also something, we're having meetings all the time. So I think there's probably one meeting where we can set aside 15 to 20 minutes to bring up a conversation like this and just start including our teams in thinking about things in this way. Like, hey guys, we all have emotions here. We're human beings. So let's actually start considering what our emotions are. What is it that's driving you to react certain ways? Like, how have you noticed that your feelings have been changing from day to day? Do you feel happy or content in your current experience? And if not, like if you're not feeling happy or content, let's find a way to figure out a way to make you more so, and I think that's, again, it's just finding that proactive approach and being willing to introduce these things, because there's ways to integrate it, I think, almost in very seamless ways, if not just creating a meeting solely dedicated to it,
Yeah, and spending more time together versus the opposite, because that one thing that goes bad, it's going to take up to 5 more interactions with that person that are positive to remove that one negative scenario. And so we have to spend time with each other.
Well, and what's interesting too about this is, Jared, you're constantly bringing up this idea of leveling the playing field, and so if we can actually start integrating a concept like this into our meetings on a regular basis and show up ourselves as the leader, willing to discover this for ourselves with our staff and say, hey, you know what? I've noticed that the work that I've been doing lately is wearing on me. It's very emotionally trying. I'm probably not showing up in a way that's healthy for me or having a good impact on you guys. So I would love to talk about that with you and then also get a sense of what your guys' experiences are like. And so then again, it becomes it's like culture building as well. And it gives them permission to see you as a human being and not just as somebody who's sort of above it all.
Right. And I think that's, if we open up and share our personal moments and feelings, people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about feelings at work. No, but actually we kind of do. We kind of need to open up, because otherwise you have this facade that everything is okay, but really like there's something behind there. And the moment that you become vulnerable and open up, you're going to build relationships and people will see you as a person and not perfect. And maybe, that some work will get done just a little bit easier.
Right, absolutely. So really quickly, oh, sorry, Jared, go ahead.
No, you're totally fine. I was just going to add on to that, if we're trying to paint ourselves as a leader as perfect, then we have to be really, really aware that our people are going to expect us to be perfect.
Right.
So the more that we send that message, the more we have to be ready to field those times where our employees point out, hey, here you made a mistake. Hey, there you made a mistake. And so it is that level playing field, that vulnerability, sharing, the times in our lives where we make mistakes, where we don't know it all, so that other people are invited to do the same. I think that's critical.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's also making it okay to bring, like you said, Jamie, to really bring emotions into the workspace, and make it acceptable to have these conversations in a way that's, again, humanizing our experience as opposed to trying to force us to show up in a way that detaches us from, our day-to-day reality. We go to work every single day, and you're asking people to just separate themselves from what their experience and their feelings are. It's like, no wonder people aren't feeling fulfilled in their work because they just literally can't express themselves. So I have 2 things that I want to ask. So one, I would love to actually spend a little bit more time going over maybe the meanings and representations of the values that you had mentioned earlier: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So we can maybe give examples to our audience of what those look like. And then also, Gregory asked a really great question, so I would love to wrap up with the question he asked.
Okay, perfect. So values is really, I think it's an exercise you probably have to do. And there's sheets out there if you need it. Let me know, where there's 100 words, respect, autonomy, communication, abundance. There could be 100 words, and you go through the exercise and say, well, what just pops out to you that's important to you, and highlight that. Then narrow that down to 10, and then narrow that down to 5, and ask yourself, are you actioning these values, and how important are they really? And then maybe going back and saying, but what else? What else, the person that I am now, or the person that I want to develop into, what are the values still aligned? And so you get your 5, and then you're kind of seeing, well, I'm triggered because I'm on this project and the communication is poor and the respect is poor, but I identified what communication looks like to me versus what this person thinks is communication, and then bridging the gap through a conversation, right? And so that would be a values identification. S would be status. And so if you feel like your position, the level of work that you're doing, is being challenged by someone else, let's say you are a leader, you are a director, and you have 20 reports, and you feel as though the status of your position is being challenged and you're not being included in things that you feel like you should be, that can be a trigger for you in the workplace. So the next one is C, which is certainty, which is really big when it comes to, well, is my position going to be eliminated? Am I going to be moving into another department? Is it certain that I know what's going to happen? Because I don't know the future, I kind of freak out. So that would be C. And then A is autonomy. And, most of us as adults, we want to be able to do work independently, right? And so if you have someone who's hovering over you, or always questioning your work, or always being involved in every step of the way, that can be a trigger for you. Relatedness is really just feeling like you're a part of the team, feeling like you are accepted and liked. If you are the outsider in a group and you feel it's intentional or not, that could have some sort of response for you, that you don't feel included, and so you're not working at your highest ability. And then the last is F for fairness, which is obviously someone being treated differently than you, and you're similarly situated, and so that's not going to work for you. So that would be the SCARF.
Got it. I love it. Excellent descriptions of all of those. And so the question that, unless you have a follow-up question, Jared.
I can ask a question, but I didn't have one. It might have just clicked.
No. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So Gregory asked, what if your leader or manager is not being proactive with their own development, as in they haven't learned to become a better leader, or more balanced and more understanding, et cetera? How do you ask or encourage them to do self-development without crossing boundaries? So if you're on a team with a leader who's really not doing this type of work, or when you're in an environment, maybe even as a business owner, if your manager is not, really stepping into this role, how can you cultivate that sense of awareness for them?
So that's a really good question. And so you can't force anyone to do self-development, but you can be a model for change. And that's why I say leadership is not a title, it's the ability to influence change. And so if you're working for someone who's not emotionally intelligent, and you know that, and it's happened time in and time out, you can be the leader and say, you know what, I have this really cool idea. Can we as a team work on this? And this is where I've seen positive results. And if you want, I'd be willing to lead that for you, right? And you could do it that way. The other way is, sometimes you need to have what I call a crucial conversation with someone, and be very specific with examples minus emotion, how they are coming across and what the impact is. So those are two different approaches that you could do, but it doesn't mean that just because someone is your leader that you just have to be subject to it, right?
Right. Absolutely. And I think that this actually brings up what I really love about this, is that it shows that the onus of communication is not just on the person who's sitting in that leadership position, but that everybody should be held responsible for communicating their own feelings, right? And expressing their own needs. And I find this time and time again, especially in the teams that I've worked with, where the teams, the individual team players were not willing to talk about or express their needs, probably because they just didn't even know how. And so I think, again, as a leader, it's great to be able to show or provide this as a tool to help your teams better understand what their feelings are. But for those of us that are on teams as well, being those team players, how can we learn to better express and take responsibility for our emotions, and then also learn how to communicate what our needs are in a way that helps, again, build up the culture and create bonds, as opposed to, tearing down the bridge.
Yes. And it takes self-awareness. It takes, being willing to say, I'll go first. These are my values. Sometimes I'm not really great when communication is broken down, but what is communication? And so it's having those conversations and not just saying, oh, that's that person. That's just how they are. Do you guys have feedback? I don't know if you can hear.
We can hear you. I don't have any feedback on my end.
Okay, good. Someone's mowing their lawn.
I love the point of communication. I think it's incredibly critical. And if you're working for someone and you feel like they're not into developing themselves, you've got to make a decision. Do I communicate it with them? Do I go talk to them and try to influence change? As you're saying, certainly be the model. Always be trying to change yourself. But it may come down to, hey, is this somebody that I want to continue to work for? And you may have to make a decision that way and make that. I don't always recommend that, but I think it's incredibly important. Especially as it relates to those leaders. Yeah, likewise. I think everybody, who you work for is almost more important than what it is that you're doing. And so really establishing, okay, is this somebody who's going to grow me and help me actually get to where I want to be? It also reminds me, Gallup did some research a couple of years ago, and they found that not only do employees not meet with their managers, but employees often, they don't ask for exactly what they want. So if we have a leader who we have a problem with, really ask yourself, have I really been explicit about what I need, what I'm missing? And that doesn't mean,
I expect them to have telepathy and know exactly
what they want. It doesn't mean that you go in there and you say, this is what you need to do to be a better leader, but you can absolutely go in and say, hey, I'm just feeling like my tasks aren't challenging me enough, or I'm feeling like I'm not getting the guidance that I would hope for so that I can develop to the next level. And so that puts that position in that person in a position to serve versus take this criticism that, hey, you're kind of a bad leader because you do this, this, and this.
And that's subjective, right? That's my opinion of you. It's my perception. Yeah. So
based I think on your values, right?
Right. And so it's an I statement. This is what I need. This is what works for me. This is, what feeling engaged at work looks like for me. Can we get to a point where we meet that gap? And so it's always focused on you versus me as the person versus you, the other person. And I think you get a better response that way. And then you are teaching people what works for you.
Right. Love that.
And based on their response, you can that's a reference point.
Based on their response. Okay. Now you're bringing it to another level that it may not work.
There you go. Go ahead.
It may not work. Yeah. This approach may not work.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it may not, but then okay, this is someone that when I go and I express my needs, they don't respond. And I'm not saying that they do what you want, but maybe they're not empathetic. Maybe they don't mobilize other resources to be able to support you. Maybe they don't take ownership of their role in it. And those are all just, again, reference points where you say, okay, is this somebody that I want to work for?
Exactly.
Do I want to continue to be employed here under this person? Or is there somewhere else I'd want to go where somebody is really going to invest a little bit more? And we know people don't leave companies, they leave managers, right? So,
but you've learned something in the process about yourself.
Amen.
One, you're communicating objectively. You stood up for yourself. You probably taught that leader something about themselves. And at the end of the day, you're not waiting and stuffing all your emotions, and then one day you blow up, and then it's like, what just happened? But yeah, so you're developing the process regardless.
Yeah. And I think that the most important thing here too is, one, let's just assume that nobody knows how anybody's feeling at any given time, right? And that's also not anybody else's responsibility to assume how you feel, right? So nobody knows how you're feeling, and it's not anybody's responsibility to assume how you feel. The other thing is, it's your responsibility, absolutely, to try and take that first initial step in communicating what your needs are or what your feelings are to find a resolution. And I think too often, especially in the workplace, it so easily shifts into a place of blame where, again, you can just say, oh, it's their fault or it's their issue, or this person isn't doing X, Y, and Z, instead of, again, seeking the solution out and saying, okay, well, hey, I'm having this experience. I would love to find a solution to this myself, and don't always make it somebody else's responsibility to create the solution for you. Seek it out for yourself.
Right. Yes. And
yes. Yes. But Jamie, you have been so incredible. Thank you so much for your time. Before, I know we've kind of kept you a little extra today, but before we end this with you, I would love for you to talk about She Leads Her. I know that this is, a really important project, business for you. So if you want to just kind of give us a little rundown about what you're doing and share with the audience.
Yeah, so She Leads Her is really a platform for the millennial woman and Gen Z. And so there's three different modules or plans for that. And so one is a professional working women, and creating a platform where we come together and we talk about our struggles and be very real and honest about what's happening in the workplace. If there is sexism, if there is feeling of inequity, but also having women come together that don't experience that and have really great examples on how they're killing it in their career, right? So that's one element of She Leads Her. The other piece of it is we are now going into junior highs and high schools. So we're teaching young girls, what is emergent leadership? How do you rise to leadership without even having a title? And what does that look like? How do you stand up to bullies and sexism? And how do you stop mean girls? How do you stop hating other girls and women for reasons that really are just, there's no good reason to it, right? And then teaching the girls how to manage stress through meditation and visualization, and how to look at their upbringing and challenge what they thought was power and leadership. So that's one module of She Leads Her. And then we're also going into nonprofits that serve the underserved women that don't have access to corporate level training or graduate level education in leadership. So that's really what it's about. And the main focus is to help close the gender wage gap and the leadership gap, because right now in the United States, we have about 20% women in C-suite positions, and 3% of that are women of color. So that's really the mission of She Leads Her.
Beautiful. Love that. Excellent. She has a page, so you can follow and like her page. It is She Leads Her, right? Is your page on Facebook, and I believe you also have a group if you want to link that in the comments.
Yep, I can link it in the comments. My website is sheleadsher.org, and we are looking for volunteers of any women who are looking to mentor young women in the junior high and high schools. So I'll link all of that here. Yeah.
We applaud your work, and thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise and knowledge and time with us. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was great meeting both of you. Well, I already know Natalia, but I don't know Jared yet.
You do now.
Okay. So good to meet you. Okay.
All right.
We'll talk later.
Bye, all right, Jamie. Bye. Thanks. Bye.
Oh, it was so awesome.
Awesome. She's doing great work.
Yeah, great work and such incredible insight.
I almost said it's funny, but it's not funny how often communication comes up. I mean, again, we're left talking about, are you communicating with the people around you? Are you communicating with your team? Are you communicating with your leaders? And what are you communicating? Are you communicating how you really feel? All of that. It's just such a critical element of communication.
Well, and I think that what happens is that oftentimes the psychology of communication often gets overlooked. We just think about communication as this thing that everybody knows how to do, but there's there's so many different components of communication, and not often people aren't always taught how to communicate in a way that how can they effectively express their needs, their feelings, their experiences, and then also how can we receive communication in a way where we're not taking it personally, So again, it's a very complex topic, and it's so relevant to leadership. And I think it might be the biggest component or contributing factor to bad leadership, or where the complications in leadership arise happen. I mean, I think I would say most often in this space. So,
well, it is complex because communication is complex, and there's emotions, and especially in the workplace, there's emotions involved. There's, politics involved. There's sometimes, clients in the middle or colleagues in the middle, and it's complex. At the same time, it's not. At the same time, it's just communication, and you can just go talk to someone with the intent to be open and honest and hash it out, and get results. And so
Right.
we have to just kind of put that fear aside sometimes. And yes, it's complex. But if we
Right.
really truly go and we engage someone with an interest in understanding, in sharing, in being open, then we'll always learn something coming out of it. We might actually
Right.
get what we want, right? We might actually realize success and figure out a solution. But at the end of the day, we're going to learn something. And that might be that, hey, this isn't somebody I want to work for anymore. This is not a company I want to work for. Or, this person doesn't really feel very open when I'm, sharing these kinds of things. So just go do it anyways. That's what I want to say. Go communicate
Well,
anyways.
and I agree. And I think that, again, like too often we're just sort of, we're just, again, we're holding ourselves back from just going all out and giving it a try because maybe we're worried again, it's
Right.
just the fear, or it's also, we're worried about our delivery. We're not going to be able to express ourselves perfectly. We're not going to be received well, and we're always thinking of the negative experience or consequence of this communication, right? But I think the one question that I would encourage everybody to ask themselves who's facing themselves in a situation where communication is necessary in order for their forward movement or growth in this experience is, what if it turned out well? And
Right.
also ask yourself, how would I need to express myself in a way to be heard effectively so that the outcome is exactly what I want? And really, again, prepare yourself in advance for what you want to express and communicate instead of just thinking, oh, well, it's just not going to work, and really going in with that negative framework in mind, because that's only going to make it even harder to communicate when you're approaching the
Yeah.
situation. One of the things that Vanessa, so I went to this recording for an online course with Vanessa Van Edwards a couple weeks ago. I think I've shared this with you. And she actually presented this really great framework as well about what is it? It's about strengthening connections. And we talked about, like, there's 5 different components of strengthening connections. And I think this is where Jamie's values chart fits in really nicely, because it really, the first one that Vanessa brings up is psychological safety. So more often than not, the tensions that arise in the company culture or within the teams come out of this lack of psychological safety. And so people are either feeling like, again, they're fearful of communicating their needs, or they don't know how to express their needs, or the space just hasn't been opened up for people to be able to express themselves and to be heard. And so I think that as a leader, what we can do on our end is not only be willing to express ourselves in a way that's healthy, but then also, and then be bold enough to take those steps towards communicating, right? Not be fearful and hold back from that, but also to think about how we can create safe space for people to express their needs and communicate with us. So maybe that's just explicitly saying, hey guys, like, it is important to me that you guys do feel like you can share your needs with me, and that I am here and willing to listen to you. That it just expressing that willingness to hear them, I think, would go a long way.
And Sean Morris, when he was on our show a couple of weeks back, he talked about keep asking your people, keep asking them, hey guys, what can I do better? What's going well? Where do you feel like I'm being supportive? Where could I be more supportive? And keep asking them until they start to believe, like, oh, he's actually interested in helping me be better, or changing, or improving. And so, yeah, always asking. Again, I would say strip away some of the complexity and just go out there. If you're a leader and you're like, man, my team doesn't talk to me, well, go talk to them. Pull up a chair, sit down in their cube, just commit to hold out past the, like, oh, why is my boss in my cubicle or in my office? And just commit to just go be interested. You're going to find amazing stuff out. And at the end of the day, they're going to say, hey, that was nice. And at first, they might be a little caught off guard, but if you're consistent, then they'll start to enjoy it probably. And then who knows what happens when you actually, like, have a relationship with your people.
Right. Well, and what's interesting, I actually have a personal story about that, where I went in, I noticed that there was some tension between, or resistance between me and one of the staff members. And so I actually, brought her aside and said, hey, you know what, I'm feeling this thing. I don't know exactly what it is. It's some tension, it's some resistance. I'm just getting a sense that basically the relationship that I would love to have with you, that we're not really having that kind of relationship. And so I just want to let you know that I'm here to listen if you have something to say. Now, that's how I thought I said it. How I actually said it was probably more of like, hey, I'm feeling really uncomfortable about this, so what's going on? You know? And I think because of my own fears and my own, I would say insecurities around communicating and being vulnerable, right? Because I felt vulnerable in this moment. I'm like approaching a situation where I could clearly feel that this person has an issue, which made me feel really uncomfortable. I'm like, all right, I got to figure this out. So I'm trying to approach it as best as I can, but then my own defense mechanisms still came up no matter how much I wanted to communicate in a way that was really, soft and open and, accessible to her. So I was listening to myself as I was communicating and realized that it wasn't nearly what I thought I was going to say or how I would like to say it. And it was sort of rough around the edges. And so anyways, she ends up responding back, oh no, everything's fine. She maybe gave me a couple lame examples of maybe something that might have bothered her, but I could tell it just wasn't the actual root of the problem, and that we weren't really getting to where I wanted to go because I knew there was something there. And so probably because she could sense my defensiveness, she also probably put up her wall a little bit and then wasn't willing. She was only basically willing to go as deep or as far as I was willing to go in that particular moment.
Sure.
But the thing is that as imperfect as that communication was, it opened the door. 2 days later, she actually came and pulled me aside and she said, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about the conversation that we had. I realized, I know what you were trying to get at. And I realized for whatever reason, I couldn't be fully open with you, even though I knew, I really knew that you did care and that you wanted to hear me. I just wasn't ready or really aware of what my feelings were, but I've had time to think about it.
Yeah.
And this is actually what's been going on. And it was like, because I was willing to go there to begin with, again, no matter how imperfect. And then after some time, giving her the time to process it, bringing it to her awareness, right? She then felt like it was okay to express herself to me later on, a few days later. And it worked out. I mean, I think that from that point, both of our guards were dropped and lowered a little bit. And the communication was actually really open and went really smooth. But it would have never happened if I would have allowed my fears and insecurities to control or determine the outcome there.
And what a great example of where you recognize that you didn't communicate in the best way possible. So what's the moral of the story? Whether it sounded like it did in your head or how it actually came out, you can't go wrong if you're going to communicate. It's better than nothing. So go communicate. I mean, and learn from it. If you totally go out and you botch it, then great. Now, next time you know one way that didn't work. So try a different way and see if you get a different outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So Abigail says, it can be hard when others don't realize that you're trying to open communication. People often think that I'm arguing when I'm trying to take the communication to a deeper level. So I think that when it comes to that, again, it's really creating the sense of psychological safety. And to my story just a second ago, sometimes when we are first trying to open this communication, we actually don't sound the way that we hope we're sounding. But I think that ultimately the hope is that we'll be received nonetheless at some point. And so I think it is, depending on the person that we're speaking to, we also, and this goes back to Jamie's values chart, is recognizing what's important to them and knowing maybe how this person needs to be communicated with and really being mindful of their sensitivities. I'm not saying that you have to craft something that's above and beyond in order to, get through to somebody, but it is helpful, at least in my experience as a leader. It has been incredibly helpful to learn what it is that how this person receives information, their sensitivities around communication, their psychological needs and values, and then from there, try to approach it in a way where I know they'll be more receptive. Because sometimes our communication styles are not always the same as other people's, right? And so, I think my relationship with my mom is evidence that, again, I communicate in a way that she doesn't communicate, and then there you go. It's like, next thing you know, it's like, there's a fire in the house.
Yeah. But you guys are both capable of putting it out, so that's the good thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I think you're totally right. Jenny makes a comment about, well, there's also on top of the complexity of, the politics, the communication styles, there's also just the lexicon. The words that we use have different meanings from one to the next. So the book that Jamie referenced, Crucial Conversations, has some really good strategies around stepping out of that conversation, the content of the conversation, and trying to create it a safe space again to make sure that we're not we're not going after someone's person, but we're stepping out and trying to understand the meaning. So the crucial conversations, one of the ideas they have is step out with a don't do kind of thing. Oh, I don't mean to say that you don't care about me. I do want to figure out a way that we can all come to work and engage and have a good time at work, working with each other, have a good working relationship. So kind of that idea of when you recognize that they're meaning something different than you, try to take what they're meaning, what they've verbalized to you, and take it back. Oh, I don't mean this. What I do want to do, and then kind of point to the outcome. What is the objective here? Crucial Conversations also talks about just having that mutual purpose, and sometimes stepping out and really diving into what is it that we really individually want out of this. And just stepping away and having somebody try to come clean with, you know what, I want to position myself to get a promotion, or I want to, make sure that I'm the lead on this project. That sometimes cutting away from all the, political shifting can just kind of help us get on a clear playing field. So it's definitely tough, complex for sure.
Well, and I think also too, if you do find yourself in an emotional space when you're trying to communicate with somebody, I think it's important to ask yourself, what am I really feeling about this and why? Yeah. And if you are charged up in any way, whether that's, emotionally charged through anger or, hurt or sadness, take some time to process those feelings first before you go to communicate. I know in the past, I have had a tendency to want to communicate on the spot immediately, because that's just been, I wanted the solution. I was reacting out of emotion, and then I wanted to find a solution right away. But what was happening is that my emotions were layering or informing the way that I was communicating. And so people can feel, just as much as they're hearing the words, what's more important to them is actually what they're feeling from you, in that experience. And so, take some time first. Maybe do some writing about what you're actually experiencing personally. Again, bring in, like Jamie was saying, it's like you really want to bring that awareness yourself as a leader to process what your own values are, what your own experiences is, what's triggering you. And then from there, take some time before you jump into communication to make sure you're level, then go in. It's time to wrap up. I know I just want to bring up one more thing, and that's just dependability. So I talked about psychological safety. The next thing I would say that's really essential to this whole process is dependability. So making sure that you're consistent, you're dependable, that people can feel like, if they are going to communicate with you as a leader, that you're resilient enough to, as Susan has said in the past, be that pillar of strength, and be strong enough to handle the emotions of the person that's communicating with you and not react. And so if you can show and prove time and time again that you're dependable in that way, people will start to feel more and more comfortable expressing themselves and their needs to you.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that in terms of just predictability as well. It's like, right, if you're going to fly off the handle whenever anybody comes and tells you anything, guess what? Nobody's going to come and tell you everything.
Right, exactly.
So, stay cool, calm, collected, and hear it, and take it.
Yeah, be cool, guys. Be cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Hopefully you guys love this episode. Give us a love, give us a like, share if you find that this brings value to you or to others, and like the page, join the group. We'll put in the link below, and we would love to see you guys in there.
Catch us next time. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you guys Friday.
All right. Bye.
See ya.